am a life, love, and intimacy coach for queer women. So I help with life issues, relationships, dating, intimacy issues. I wouldn't say issues, just intimacy in general. Working a specialization with those on the asexual spectrum. I am a certified sexologist, life coach, and relationship and sex coach. So I work with BDSM, kinks, fetishes, a lot of alternative lifestyles, and help people destigmatize that in their own way, releasing internal biases, shame, allowing couples or individuals to explore their wants, needs, and desires either together or individually, and learn to love and appreciate intimacy on however that looks for them.
I want to ask you quickly because not many people seem to be even comfortable defining it. But if you were to define asexuality for someone listening, how would you define it for them?
So, spectrum. You can go from sexually averse, where you just don't want anything to do with anything sexual, to the other end, where you border on like gray sexuality or allosexuality, where you have an interest in it, but you might only like demisexual. You have to have a close emotional relationship to that person in order to be intimate or sexually intimate with them. So a lot of people who are identify as asexual will also have sexual intimacy with their partners because their partner wants it or they need it. They're willing to do that, but they don't find much gratification in it. And we also find that a lot in queer or lesbian communities, where you have touch me nots or pillow princesses and stuff like that, where they're willing to do that for their partner, but they don't really want anything done to them, or they're just satisfied with what they provide for their partner and just really don't have an interest for it themselves. So it can go from sexually averse to I'm interested, but it's selective in when I'm able to be intimate with somebody, if I'm interested at all. And you can also go through waves and fluctuations too. So like my wife and I are demisexual. So sexual intimacy is important, but it's more for us, it's intimacy, and it doesn't always have to involve sex. So as long as we have our intimacy and we have our connection and things like that, exploration of BDSM or kink, or even spending time with each other, cuddling, making out is perfectly fine for us sometimes, and then we'll feel like having sexual intimacy, and then we both go on if it's not an emphatic yes for both partners, then it just doesn't happen. So we find the time when we line up. But it also leaves a lot of stress in our relationship of we need to do this so many times a week. We need to do this. We need to have that all the time, where we find our needs and connection in other ways.
I see. Wow, that's really interesting. So it sounds like both of you are fed more through, like you're saying, the intimacy and the connection than anything else. Although, like you said, it's waves. Like maybe there's some times where one partner is like, I'm actually really wanting this, and the other one's like, I'm actually really tired or not, or whatever the
Or
case.
I'm just not feeling myself, or for whatever reason. Yeah, then it's like, okay, you need this. I support you in your solo play, masturbation and stuff like that. So we support each other with that. So we have to come together at the same time.
So this is really interesting because obviously on Live Jasmine, there's between model and member, there is never touch. Never.
Correct. It's digital. Yeah.
It's digital. There's never touch. And what's really interesting to me is that, kind of like what we were talking about at the start of the call, before we started filming, I've interviewed hundreds of members, and so many of them, obviously, if they're willing to be on camera and give an interview, they're really supportive of Live Jasmine. They really for the product, So that is the demographic that I'm working with. But So when I ask them, like, what's kept you on the site for 18 years, 15 years, 10 years, because many of them have been on the site for that long or longer, and they'll say, this model just gets me. I can tell her anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're on a cam site, like that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. Yeah, I mean, I initially came because I saw this ad that was really hot, but then I met so and so, this model,
Mm-hmm.
and they built this connection. And now, actually, what is feeding them is this connection. I've interviewed some members who are like, I actually just don't, because they went through a nasty divorce and they're like, I don't want to date, but I
Mm-hmm.
want like someone that I can tell everything to, and that connection that you might have with a partner. And so they've been using the platform to get that.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like for many of them that I've talked to, that intimacy and the connection part is actually the most important part for them. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious your thoughts on this. It's kind of a chicken before or the egg question, but are in many cases are when we are having, let's say, sex or chasing it, are we having it and chasing it for the connection that we get from it, even if it is just a one-time thing? Or are we chasing connection for the sex?
I think we're chasing connection. With my years of experience in what I do as a coach, as a sexologist, and also as somebody who worked in the adult industry as a cam model, creating content, doing audios, PSO, um, all of it. It's about the connection and trust. We are social creatures. We are sexually social creatures. So we take intimacy. We're also, especially in Western society, we have a lot of taboo and restriction about even casual sex or touching somebody. We have a very puritanical view, but we're naturally biologically wired to need touch and connection and stuff like that. But what's the best way to do that we're taught? Sex. Sex is in our faces and we're told how to have it. We're told what to do, but then we're told we're not supposed to do this. It's supposed to be one person. And that's just not always how that works. There's a lot of people out there's great books written about how we are and relating to sexual social creatures biologically to how our brains work. There's just so much information out there that we know now in neuroscience and sexology and all of that, which a lot of the interviews you guys have done already have expounded upon that. But it really is connection. And sometimes we're seeking that, but biologically, we find somebody physically attractive and we have those responses. And of course, we want to act on that, which is great and fine. And it's safe to do it in a digital way. For a lot of people with disabilities, mental health issues, divorces, it doesn't matter. And I've worked with men and women. I've worked with all genders on the spectrum, and this is just not male specific. I've had a lot of women who also seek that too. It is connection without obligation. You can come and go as you please. It's a service. You're paying for the service. We know it's transactional, but that doesn't minimize that human connection that you have there. And I think it's really just connection.
100%.
Like if you just take the sex aspect out of it, like you become friends, you become online friends. You're paying for the service, but you build the connection off of that. And they become loyal. And then even as somebody who worked on the other end of it, you end up liking them. You're like, oh, I know about you. You start to have empathy and compassion for them. And you look forward to seeing them because they just bring a great energy. You just connect and it's nice. And I don't see how that's any difference than if you meet somebody in person. Like I really don't see a difference between like if you went to a bar and you have your neighborhood bar that you like to go to and you have your favorite bartender and the same people that come, especially in chat rooms, in the public chat rooms, you got all these people, you have your regulars and they all start to build friendships and they develop that outside of the platform. They follow on social media. So you build this little community and they really all is just connection.
I think that's what surprises people the most is the fact that sex is kind of the face of the
Of course.
the industry, but it's not really about sex,
It's
especially
not.
when you're paying for like something that's digital, when it's
Hmm.
you could go and find free porn in 2 seconds, and
Hmm.
you're paying for the interaction.
Hmm.
Because you have experience in the industry modeling, what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about the industry overall?
I think the biggest misconceptions, there's twofold, because there you got the consumer and then you have the provider. On the consumer aspect, it's dirty old men, it's cheaters, and it's perverts, which couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah, are you going to get some of those? Yeah, they straggle in, but those are the ones that tend to like to make drama. They're just not the norm. These they're people of many backgrounds and stuff that want to consume this. It's safe for them. I worked a lot with people with disabilities. I had this one client for a couple of years who had cerebral palsy, and unfortunately we infantilize those with physical disabilities or mental disabilities, but they're still human beings with human drives. And if these are the people that can't go out and just be like, hey, get those needs met, because we see them for that and not what they're seeking, and we're not taught how to have intimacy with people with disabilities, especially when you start getting into the kink and BDSM world. We don't know what to do with that. Like, am I going to hurt you? Or they may not know how to do it. So they find people who are professionals in order to be able to explore sensations that are differently. It's not always penis and vagina sex. It has a lot to do with maybe somebody, again, is asexual, but they want to see something and they enjoy masturbation, but they don't want to have sex with somebody else, but they want to have a connection. So there's that. There's so many different aspects, and that's a huge misconception. I always hated that about it. And on the model side, it's always, oh, they're desperate, they're sluts, they're all of this, they're not successful, they can't do anything else. I know when I got into it, I started camming because I needed to make extra money. I needed to change my life. I needed to get out of this relationship that I was in, and I was working, but I had kids to take care of, so I needed the extra money. And so I started doing that. And that's when I learned very quickly it's not the stereotype that was I knew it to be. And especially the uneducated part. Most of the sex workers that I knew had multiple degrees. Were using it as a jump off point to pay for college, to pay for the things that they wanted to pay for, and then they could launch their business afterwards. They could move on to be something more successful. There's also lifetime people who love to do this. They love the connection. They love creating. I always like to think of it like when I was working in the industry was that this is an art form. I'm acting, I'm creating an environment. Like it's all a curation of fantasy for me to do this. And I have other plans to move on. But I use this as like, this is my canvas, but the adult industry just happens to be my paintbrush. It's no different than any other industry. Like I work in other industries and there's literally no difference. All it is just the paintbrush happens to be adult content. And I can profit off of that. I enjoyed my time in the 5 years that I did it. I loved it. But I also knew I wanted to help people more than what I do just here because my audience is limited. So I want to be able to help more people. I want to educate on how to do this. I know professionally, I know personally. I have the certifications in it, all of that. So I wanted to move into coaching and therapy to help people more. When I was working in the industry, if that could do that, the industry had that, oh, I probably would still be in it. But it didn't have that. And that's where I wanted to go more. But those are the two biggest misconceptions, like from the client and the creator aspect of it.
I completely agree with you. I've interviewed hundreds of Live Jasmine's models, and half of them that I've interviewed are millionaires from being on Jasmine. And
Mm-hmm.
these women are some of the most brilliant business women I have ever taught. I'm like literally taking notes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And how did you do that? You know, like they're so
Yeah.
smart, they're
Hmm.
so savvy. They are actual business women, you know,
Hmm.
and they have a really healthy mentality. Like you said, like a lot of people assume, oh, they have these issues or they're just desperate or trying to do this or trying to do that. And I like in every situation, I'm sure that exists. I know I haven't interviewed that in the hundreds of models that I've interviewed. You know, they've had actually a really healthy and positive mindset. Many of them don't even drink alcohol. They are
Hmm.
just like really focused and live these very clean lifestyles, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm not one to partake in the drinking and stuff for the most part, or anything. And I just knew like, okay, I'm going to invest this money into the gear, not just the gear for content creation, but I want to do this. Like this is the end goal. Like I'm going to invest now while I have it so I can build this dream where I would otherwise have to take out business loans and be indebted. And I didn't have the debt because I was able to support as well as build, and get the education. And there's especially in the pro dom world, like there's sex therapists who are also working in the adult industry. Like there's people with doctorates who are writing books to help other adult industry people to be successful. Like it's amazing that the community there to support and surround for success. And again, even if they are planning on being in this for a long time, they end up taking it in a little bit different direction. They become educators, they become writers, they become influencers, they work for other companies, like platforms like Jasmine, to try and change it from the inside. Like I know I did a really big impact when I shift over to women. It was a certain, like, most of the platforms didn't advertise, market, or cater to queer women. So my thing was like, I have these consumers, but they don't know to look at these platforms because the advertising isn't there. And since I have a background in advertising and digital marketing, I was like, how can we do this? Here's the numbers. And also, here's how successful this could be. Because if you look at platforms like Wattpad, it's huge, huge. Queer women erotica is everywhere. How about we start adding audio? What about little books or PDFs that we could do and things like that? So you branch out and you build these skills, and those skills are marketable in the outside world if you ever do want to leave the adult industry. You can learn so much in it. And the barrier to entry is nice and low. And that's the part about digital, is that you can put all the boundaries you want. And again, there's no touch. It's human connection without the physical touch, and it's safe. It's safe for a lot of people on both sides. And I love that.
Yeah. And you can be anywhere you want to be in the world. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's
There's a lot
incredible.
of freedom with it,
Yeah.
and it's excellent. Like I wish more people would allow themselves to be able to partake of that, or allow their partners to do that, because it's not an offense or an affront to the relationship as long as you have the communication. If there's issues, you need to say couples therapist or a sex therapist, do that, or a coach, or things like that. There's a lot of information, and it can be safe and healthy with the proper communication.
What would you say is the biggest lesson you learned in your 5 years camming?
Um, there's a lot of people who do not get the human intimate connection that they need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that we have a bigger problem with shame and internal biases over sexual intimacy and exploration of that than I ever thought possible. And I knew I wanted to get into this, but it is so much more pervasive than I ever thought. And that there are people out there who are literally struggling with their own identity because they don't know how to navigate that outside of the digital sphere.
Mm.
And it's heartbreaking. And they just don't know where to go. And I'll even admit, like even as a coach and in therapy, we just don't talk enough about it. It's not out there. And though we're trying, we're limited by social media platforms and the restrictions that go along with that, even though it's just education, not doing anything. It's still restricted, just like the adult industry. We're just as we're just as restricted as any of the models are, because I can't go and educate on certain topics. I have to change like how I write things or how I say things. Like I can't say sexologist, I have to say smexologist. I have to say the B's, the D's, the S's, and the M's. Like I can't say those things. So we're really restricted in being able to educate people so they are able to enjoy this. Because that, again, puritanical society, we want to control it, but we still are humans and it's basic human nature.
As someone who sees clients, has worked in the adult industry in camming and been able to interact with people, what effect do you think that this is having on people when they don't know where to turn or go to about their sexuality? Or, like you said, they're not getting that as much connection as what they really need as a human being. What are some of the consequences we might see from that?
Self-esteem issues, like self-value, um, toxic relational behaviors, a very unhealthy relationship to sex. Um, that's a big one. Partners and expectations, inability to communicate what their needs, wants, and desires are, even within themselves. They don't even know what their needs, wants, and desires are. I do have one of my platforms on social media where I switched over from my content creator account in the adult industry over to the coaching. So I still have followers from that when I was in the adult industry. And when I'll go live, they're like, oh, were you so and so? And I was like, yes, I was so and so. This page has changed over. I have retired from the industry. Hopefully, you can glean new information. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to create anymore. And they're like, well, I just want to say thank you because you helped me figure out myself. I get that so often, and it just makes me so proud. I'm like, good, you were able to discover what you like, be able to communicate that with yourself and with any partner you may have or partners that you have in the future. And you have broken down those biases. But when we continue to feed into those biases, we continue to feed into shame. We continue to feed into our negative self-value. Because if we're not honest with ourselves and aren't able to explore it, then we can't do that in our relationships. And that just becomes unhealthy. And then you start fighting about sexual intimacy issues. Especially for those in the asexual spectrum, we find like we have to perform. And then we're not happy. And then we develop an unhealthy relationship with sex. And then it just, there's so many things that can go wrong with that. But it's a lot of self-value that develops into toxic behaviors.
When someone says, you helped me figure out myself sexually, what do you think it is about what you were doing? Was it just giving someone the space to explore and to try new things? Or what do you
Mhm.
think it is
It
that?
was the space to explore, to be themselves. Obviously, at first, they're like, here for one thing, and then they're like, I'd like to try this, or what about this? What do you think? We would obviously have a lot of conversation. I ask the questions, showing them how to have the healthy communication. What are your likes? What are your not likes? What's your interest level? What's your experience level? Have you ever done this with partners or have you just done solo play? Like, how do you do this? And then I build up the trust with them. And then they feel like, I don't have to be shameful here. I'm allowed to do this. Or, if they were in a relationship with somebody and they are, purchasing the service, it's like, I hear, I'm not able to talk with my partner about this. They have very different views than I do. But it's still an aspect of myself I need to explore. I can't deny this part of myself, but my partner doesn't want to partake in it. And I don't want to keep pushing them, but I need to explore it for myself. And it was just safer again digitally. It was much safer to do that. You have that live interaction, you get to explore, but it was really just educating because I also had other platforms where I would educate on kink and BDSM, and they like, I didn't know that about myself. I do have an interest, and then they're able to continue to do that. They build in excitement and release the internal biases and shame. And I just love the fact that I was able to do that. I was like, I don't have any interest in doing that with you. This is professional and transactional, that's fine. But the fact that you get excited and that has outward effects in your life, you're more confident. You can set boundaries. And when you set boundaries in sexual intimacy, then you set boundaries with friends and family. You set boundaries at work. You start to build your life how you want it to. It's such a snowball effect. And where I used to like to say, from the bedroom to the boardroom, and how like we understand ourselves in a thing that we're taught to have shame for, especially women, and queer women on top of that, you know, you have all these intersectionalities about what you say you can or cannot do, what you should or should not do. And our sex education sucks. And it doesn't allow for more conversation and a bigger, varied difference in what you can experience.
Why do you think that it's harder for women?
The way we're raised. It's definitely the way we're raised, like you get your sex education, if you even get any basic sex education growing up from family and school, is here's pregnancy and here's STIs. Don't do it. That's not good. And then you have, your religious aspects, cultural aspects, and things like that. We're not educated. And then you have the Madonna whore syndrome. If you do enjoy it, you're this, but then we're taught to be shameful of that. So then we don't want to admit that we like these things. And then you might have a partner who's very closed off as well, and you want to explore, but then they're like, ew, that's gross, the micro little aggressions and stuff. And you're like, oh, maybe I should feel shame for that. And stuff like that. Sexual assaults, it being forced on us, being told what we should or should not look like. There are so many variables when it comes to that, but women especially. And then if you're a queer woman, you have even less education on what you can do, what you can explore, because it's all mostly hetero-based. And we have more now, luckily. I've been able to get more resources and research done for queer intimacies now than it was 5 years ago. So I'm grateful for that. But I even know when I grew up, like, and my parents were pretty open about sex. Like, this is what it is, what you can do. But the deeper conversations, I was never given a book like Girl Sex 101 is a great book. But that wasn't around. You aren't handed these things, and then you go out into the world and you experience, but then you have traumatic experiences, which should be mitigated with education in the first place. And then you fuck around and find out.
Yeah, that seems to be the actual process for many things these days.
Yes, like, I don't know what I'm doing, so let's try this. But then we shouldn't have to go through traumatic experiences because we're all just not knowing what we're doing coming out here and coming together. And then we're just expected to know because it's biological. You'll know what to do. Sure, the mechanics of it, but how do you enjoy pleasure? How do you build a connection with somebody? How do you even feel like connection? Like, is sex important to you? Is it not important? And why is it important? Like breaking that down so you can have the effective communication with your partners.
Right. Yeah. But it's interesting because this concept of even just pleasure, like just enjoy,
Self-pleasure.
yeah, just
Like,
pleasure.
don't touch yourself, or you do that in private, or that's not good, or you're going to get hairy palms, or you're going to get this, or things like that. And you're even as girls, boys are like, oh, they do that, like it's common knowledge if they're in the shower too long, like, but if a girl does it, like, how are you doing that? Like, how did you masturbate? Like, do you even consider like this certain thing masturbation? Not to get too crass or anything, like I mean, but we're on an adult site. So, um, did you grind on anything? That's masturbation because you weren't allowed to touch, you know? And then you have this very negative view, like your body is gross, it shouldn't be touched, but then you're expected to just have all this fun and like you don't even know. So it's so bad. It's so bad.
I'm curious what you would say. I asked you what you would say the biggest lesson was that you learned from camming.
Mhm.
Now I want to ask you what you would say the biggest lesson is that you learned from seeing clients as a coach and a sexologist.
We need a lot more education on disabilities,
Mm.
for sure. A lot of people came with like agoraphobia, high anxiety, physical disabilities, amputations, um, paralysis, all kinds of stuff. And kindness. Kindness, I learned, like just simple empathy and compassion for somebody without judgment, creating a space without judgment. It's not my life. I'm not here to yuck your yum or anything else like that. But we need a lot more education in the adult industry. Camming, we definitely need a lot more education on how to deal with people with disabilities
Yeah,
and
that's
not assume everybody is neurotypical, not everybody is able-bodied, and stuff like that. You can build more connection with people if you understand what their needs are, be more open to talk about it, and realize that's probably what people need, and that you can talk about sex and intimacy without performing. It just makes people feel more comfortable to be themselves wholly and fully without any restriction, any shame, any judgment. And that allows people to be free to be themselves. And I think that's beautiful.
And what potential benefits have you seen when people feel safe and free to be themselves, express themselves, explore themselves?
Healthier relationship with sex, a lot healthier relationship, confidence. They start to feel confident, and they come around and you start seeing their successes. And it's just, it's such a beautiful thing to see somebody just go from like, I am here, to guess what I did? you know like you're a friend, you're a companion, you're a cheerleader, you're everything that they need in that moment, and take them and see them fly. Sorry about that. They fly off into the world, and I think it's amazing. Just more healthy, like what you teach them and what you give them, they give to other people, because we teach people how to treat us. And once they have that openness, then their standards get higher and they're not going to deal with things that don't benefit them anymore. And we could all use that.
Absolutely.
It just happens to be, well, you were here because of this. You found me attractive. I offered the service, but there's so much more that goes into it
A
when you build
lot.
those connections and relationships. A
Yeah.
lot more.
What would you say is if you have like a specific intention or goal or purpose of your work, what would you say it is that you're wanting to really bring into the world with your work?
Education, exploration, release of shame. I know I've said this multiple times, but that's a huge thing for me. Um, I I'm a woman who knew I was gay when I was a little girl, but I fell into heteronormative ideation, comp het, and I married men. I thought I had to. I thought I was bi, but then I found out, oh, I'm asexual. I'm not interested in this, but I like the industry. I love the education, but I have no interest for myself. Like, I'm okay. I'm just fascinated by this. And then I came out of the closet after my divorce, and I was like, I'm gay. Like, I can say this now. I have the freedom to be able to do this. And I had shifted my adult business over to that, providing services for the women, the queers, gender non-binary, and stuff like that. And it opened up a whole new world of expectations, experiences, and knowledge within that. And I, yeah, like you just open up so many doors with it.
Beautiful. If you could give one message to everyone in the world about human sexuality, what would the message be that you really wish people got?
We are sexually social creatures. We are so closely related to the bonobo that uses sex for friendship, um, relationship, community, that we're not that different. And we are driven by these attractions. Um, it is part of us. Like we are a species that does it for pleasure. We do it because it affects our hormones and gives us feel good feelings about ourselves and the world around us. It releases stress. There's so many benefits to this that if I could give one message out to the world, it'd be like, if I could shake anybody, like shake the world and be like, stop trying to control it, enjoy it. Everything is okay. It doesn't matter what you like. As long as it's between consenting adults, it's all gravy. Like it doesn't matter how gross you think it is or whether you should or should not do it. As long as there's communication, have fun.
I love that.
That's the that's we are sexually social creatures. Get used to it. You can fight it all you want, but the more you fight it, the more that comes out. It's like any emotion or anything. You push it down, it's going to come out. It's going to affect you. And if you try, you think you're pushing it down, but you have all these other effects. If you just allowed yourself to appreciate it and have that pleasure, you'll be okay.
Yeah. I love that. Just giving people permission.
Mhm. Yeah. Like we're sexually social. So what? Casual sex between partners, monogamy, polyamory, swinging, it 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 doesn't matter. It as long as it's consensual and you enjoy it, have fun. Like let your freak flag fly and be proud of it. Have open conversations with your friends. Have open conversations online. Uh, Dare I say, even with your family, but we're too uptight about it. So I don't think that'll change anytime soon, but it's my hope. So I hope to educate more people with that idea in mind. Like first, just accept the fact that you're a sexually social creature.
Mhm.
You want this, whatever on that spectrum, however you want it, whatever you want to do, just accept that fact. And then we can move forward. Because
Yeah,
everything from there is destigmatizing, releasing of shame, break down those internal biases, and then you can move forward.
very well said. Yeah, I think everyone's looking for that permission. I think deep down they're wanting that permission too.
Yeah, it's a permission. Is it okay that I like this? Absolutely. It's absolutely okay. And I can tell you, you're not the only one. If you can find it online, you are not the only one. There's obviously a market enough to be able to cater to that. So
Yeah,
you're definitely not the only one. So you're in good company.
I love that.
Porn, camming, content creation, all of that is a perfectly healthy aspect of sexual intimacy. It is absolutely okay. It's fine. As long as you communicate with yourself and your partner about the limitations of what is acceptable in your relationship, it could be something you enjoy together or privately. And it is absolutely okay. And if you feel it's okay and your partner doesn't, then you have a mismatch in intimacy and you need to figure out what's a good alternative for you guys. But all of it, camming is a wonderful part of sexual exploration and human connection. And just like we talked about in the beginning, it is less about the sex and more just about intimate connection. It is so not about sex. It is not about sex. Yes, sure, the initial, interaction is about that, but it's not. And honestly, I've also told people that you can always log on to Campsite. If you just want to talk to somebody, just talk to them. You can. You absolutely can. You like this person, you follow them on social media or wherever you found them, and you're like, this is interesting. And you're like, digital dates are wonderful. I think I did more digital dates than anything else. Like we would set a allotted time where we're going to be together. We even like made food, had dinner, have a conversation, things like that. It's fine. And also like, especially if you want to explore your kinks or BDSM and you're afraid to have a partner in there first, solo play is great to have with that experience and that growth and education on solo play with a cam model. It's live. They can see you. They can guide you as long as they're professional and they're experienced in it. They can guide you safely in this, and you can learn a lot about yourself and others where books just aren't answering it. And porn is not the best place, because we have to remember that porn is fantasy. We don't actually think that people are always doing that as much as it's like we don't really believe Spider-Man can crawl walls.
Right.
It's not real.
Yeah.
It is a fantasy, and it's made to be a fantasy. It's meant to take these things that are kind of impossible in your head and make it a reality, and you're watching that and you're enjoying it. Just because you see two people physically able to do these things does not make it real. But it's a great addition to your intimacy and your experiences. I watch. I'm like, okay, this is great. Wife's not here or whatever. I want to do something, but I need the visual stimulation. I have oralism. I'm a true fetishist. I have an oralism fetish. And I also teach and educate about that. So yeah, I like the sounds. I want to hear it. I want to see it. And I'm going to definitely make my solo play more efficient. And I'm going to enjoy that, but it doesn't mean I don't love my wife or find my wife attractive or we'd have issues with her. We don't. It's just, this is my time.
Right.
If I'm going to watch a movie and you don't want to watch a movie, but I want to watch this movie, I'm going to watch this movie and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to have my popcorn and my snacks or whatever I want. I'm going to enjoy it. And that's it. But porn is not real. It is fantasy. It is made to be fantasy. Even homemade stuff is meant to be fantasy. It's not how everything works. And it's also not a great place to get your education either.
Right.
But cam models are people who are experienced. They are professional. They have multiple or a multitude of people coming in with different backgrounds, experiences, and knowledge that they also glean from. So we learn just as much from our clients as they learn from us. I learned how I didn't realize before I started camming how bad it was for people with disabilities, especially physical disabilities. And I wasn't as aware about the limitations of mental disabilities. Agoraphobia was huge, and high anxiety, or autism, and they don't have the same social structure, but they still need it. So I learned a lot from my clients, which I actually implement today in my coaching practice. So, and I've been able to create certain BDSM tools that accommodate somebody who has osteoarthritis. They can't use their hands. Sensation play for those who are paraplegic or paralyzed from the waist down. What are other sensory points that will get you to have that pleasure? Where you can orgasm without actually physically touching genitals. Do you even have to touch genitals to have intimacy? You don't. You can play with kinks and BDSM without having any sexual contact whatsoever, and it can be just as pleasurable as anything else. You stimulate the mind, you stimulate the senses in your body, stuff like that. So I've learned a lot from my clients over the 5 years that I did this. And I think I learned a little bit more from them than they did from me. So
I'm so happy you brought up those points, because I always tell people, I'm like, yeah, sex is the smallest part about camming. And they look at me like, I don't know about that. I'm like, no, but I'm serious about that.
I'm serious. Yes.
I-
I know what you're thinking. You're thinking dirty old man, cheaters, and gross people
yeah.
or perverts. And I'm sorry, but we're all perverted.
Yeah,
Just because you don't say what's in your mind doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We know you like to get down a little bit of freaky, okay? It's
everyone
fine.
has their thing. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has their thing, whether you actually enact on it or not, it's in our head. You have those things, except for maybe asexuals or sexually averse, but that's fine. They're entitled to, but they also like intimacy in other ways. And it doesn't always have to be sex. They have a huge misconception. It is less about the sex and so much more about just being humans connecting with each other.
Connected,
And
yeah.
yeah, you can talk about sex, but we also talked about their dreams and their goals and what they want to do in life. They talked about their friends or how they want to express something to them, but they don't know how. So they're kind of like, well, what would you do? Like, well, this is what I would do. Or, I learned this thing or a book or a recipe. It's honestly some deep conversations, and it's definitely not small talk. Like you kind of do the small talk and like the general chat and stuff like that, but when you get on your one-on-ones, like I would have clients that would pay for like 30 minutes and like, okay, knock that out because you think I'm hot, we're gonna do this. It was 5 minutes. Okay, great, well, we have 25 minutes. Like I'm not gonna hang up on you because that's not what it's about, and we would just talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful experience with human connection.
Yeah.
And
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 that's
I
the
love that.
thing. I love how you said that. It's like it's not small talk. People aren't paying by the minute for small talk. People go to the grocery store to get their small talk and with the
Right.
cashier. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
people are not paying by the minute for small talk. They are paying for the interaction and the connection or just feeling like someone's with them. I've had models tell me that they have a member who will call them and put them on private and be like, okay, now just go about your day. And I have work to do. But they just
Hmm.
wanted to like work
Body double.
with someone. Yeah, like to feel like someone was there with them, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's their sexuality, they're heterosexual or they're queer or whatever. And it's just, I want the company
Yeah.
of a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Like that's just, yes, you're beautiful, but I want to know you.
Yeah.
And I was able to open up about some things, and I knew it was private. Like they're definitely not going to go say, oh, I was talking to this cam model and now da, da. And I know my information's not going to go out, because we have stigma. So I knew I was safe to do that, not with everybody, obviously, but you
Right.
know, share certain things about my life where I felt seen and I felt heard. Like I'm autistic and ADHD. So for me, like and really bad general anxiety. So I know like even going to the grocery store is hard for me. If you talk to me in the grocery store to the small talk, I'm probably gonna freak out.
Right.
like like internally I'm screaming like, "Ah, this is not okay." I'm like doing it, but I'm like, this isn't good. But I know also as a model, I control the environment.
Right.
I control who comes in.
Yeah.
I can navigate the conversation. And if I'm uncomfortable at any time, it gets creepy, it gets weird. Like I am uncomfortable now. I can either express that and say, you need to change it, or I can disconnect.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I know I'm safer on that. So for me, it was great socialization because I hate small talk. Like I want to know you.
Right.
It started off with that particular topic.
Right.
And also as a pro dom, I was rarely naked.
There you go.
So I was like, okay, well, this works out. And I just love fetishes and I love things that are taboo because it's less provided, especially with the education aspect of it, making sure it is safe on my end. Like what I'm doing is safe for them. And reading body language, hearing audio cues, having that communication. So that was really important to me because, you want to explore it, but oh, I can't. I can't. I can't talk to anybody about this because you hear about it in conversation. Their friends talk about sex, but oh, I would never have anybody tie me up or anything. And you're going, I would love that, but now I know I can't talk to you about that.
Right. Yeah.
You're no longer a safe space because you already gave your opinion, and now I don't feel like being vulnerable.
Right.
But you can talk to a model about that.
Yeah. I asked a model once, I was like, what do you think your job is? Like the bottom line of it. And the model said to not judge.
Hmm.
That was the bottom line job to her, to just
Yeah.
not judge. And I was like,
Hmm.
so beautiful, you know?
Yeah. It's not my place to tell you what you should or should not like. I can tell you what I will or will not provide.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I know other models that do this, because I also liked building relationships with other models, because if I don't do this, who can I send you to that I know that they're going to have a good, safe time with?
Right.
Because I have my limitations and I have my boundaries. There are just some things I'm not going to do. I'm not comfortable doing it. So I'm not going to. There's certain things that I will only do with my partner in person. And that to me is very intimate and not to be shared with anybody else.
Right.
So I'm not going to do that. But so I loved creating relationships with other models. Be like, okay, or if you needed to do doubles or anything else like that, they know that they're going to get the same quality experience without the judgment. And we were in line. So I could, hey, do you want, there's client, he wants this. You want to do that? Loves to talk. He loves these things, or she likes this. And I know you kind of specialize with that. So it ended up building a really good community too.
When you were camming, I mean, I don't know what platform you were using, but did you feel like you were seeing a lot of women, or was it mostly men?
I brought the women in.
You
The
brought the women,
platforms, like the traffic that came in from the platform
right?
was men.
It was men, yeah.
Yeah, but it was also men who were also bisexual, some trans men, or men who were feeling like they needed to transition into being a woman, gender non-binary, but it was like the traffic that came in was men.
Yeah.
Um, I was able to bring in more women because of my openness on social media and stuff like that. So I brought more women in. So I had wanted to change the platforms, like, you can market to this, and here's the statistics and analytics that prove this could be very successful for you if you did market to women too.
My final question for you is for anyone listening who's like, I realize that I haven't explored myself, or I've been afraid to explore myself, or be even honest with myself about something. What would you say are a couple practical things that they can do to be more comfortable in their sexuality, or to take that first step of knowing themselves sexually?
First thing you need to ask yourself is, why am I uncomfortable? Like, you have to take a deep dive to yourself. Have you had a traumatic experience? Like, were you essayed? Were is this cultural? Is it religious? Like, I'm not comfortable doing this. Okay, what is it that you haven't been comfortable with? Is it admitting it? Is it shame? Is it, no, I think that's gross. Well, okay, who told you it was gross? Do you like it? Okay, so how do you find a community of that? Um, Therapy is a great way to do it. As long as you find somebody who is qualified in that, specializes in it, you know, is open, then great. A coach like myself, a sex coach will help you figure these answers out. You have the answers, you just need to uncover them. And then once you have the answer, where do you go forward from there? Are you more comfortable now that you know the answer to this? Are you able to face the fear? Are you able to face the anxiety? Or is this, I am comfortably not going to do that? Like, I hear you, oh, you're supposed to like this. Okay, well, you don't have to do it just because everybody says you have to. Like, understanding boundaries with yourself. But first thing to ever do is why, and really come up with a good answer for yourself. Like, don't be satisfied with I don't know. Like, no, I have the answer. I need to figure this out. That's the first step.
Yeah, I think very well said.
It's that simple. Now, the process is hard. I'm not going to say that the process is easy. The answer is easy, is ask yourself why. The process can be very difficult because you are going to have to face some things and get like the answer to the question you may not like. But once you have the answer, then you can plan for going forward or staying staunchly where you're at. And that's a boundary with yourself. Like, give yourself permission to be able to explore those things. And then, well, how do I broach that with a partner? Okay, well, how is your communication method? That's what I love about coaching, is that it's so individualized. Like, I always say, I don't like giving generalized information because this may or may not work for you. And I don't want to come up with any possibility of what your background might be to answer your question. But it's so individualistic. That's that's why I love doing what I do, is so I can help people really figure out why. What is the answer to why you are unable to do this? I heard a lot when I was camming a lot from from the customers, clients, um, that camming and them participating in that was like sexual therapy for them.
Mhm.
They're just not, I mean, some of them might be therapists, but like that's not the time to be providing those services, obviously. But it really is. You're a confidant, you're trustworthy, you're a safe space to explore. So when you provide that, what do we want in any of our relationships? Work, friendships, family, partners, we want a safe space to be able to explore and be ourselves. So if you're not getting that in your everyday life, you don't know how to get that, but camming provides that, why not?
Right.
We pay people to bring our food to us.
The time.
Yeah, something we can do perfectly fine on our own. We can make our own food, we can bring our own food. But we pay people to clean our house. We pay people to talk to. We pay people to make our drinks. I go to the bar, pay somebody to open up a beer for me. I'm perfectly capable of doing that on my own. But we pay for not somebody to open up the bottle. We don't pay for somebody to bring us food. We pay for people to give us suggestions, provide a service. Why is that any different with Cami?
Mhm.
It's not. It's just people think that it's something other than what it actually is, or they're projecting their biases, they're projecting their shame, they're projecting their ignorance, and not willing to see anything other than what society has painted as terrible.
It's true.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love seeing sex workers of every ilk coming out and being more expressive about what they do on social media. However, there is a caveat, drawing the line between fantasy and reality and keeping those boundaries for everybody involved. Just because we have a connection does not mean we are real life friends. Doesn't mean you're entitled to anything from me other than the service that I provide. So setting those healthy boundaries, making sure both parties are on the same page with that will definitely help the longevity of what you're doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we've definitely heard that and seen that to be true and important.
Yeah. Yeah, just I love it. I think it's an amazing service and I love breaking down the stigma of it.
Yeah. Well, you've contributed to that by
I
giving us
hope
an
so.
interview. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has
Hope
been an
so.
awesome interview.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed myself. So,
Okay.
and people are able to ask me questions, find me on social media. Like, again, I don't like to give general advice, so I'm not constantly posting on social media. I post when I have like a group workshop or a coaching or anything else like that. But generally, I do go live on TikTok and I have random conversations. I'm very personable. I talk about all kinds of things. Talk a lot about relationships and communication and healthy communication coming out later in life. Um, Kink and BDSM. So they can find me there and talk more about it and see.
Where can people find you?
They can find me at thequeerlife.coach. So since I am a life, love, and intimacy coach and I am a queer woman myself, it's all about the queer life. It's everything that's queer and strange and different and all of that. So they can find me on there. They can find me also on just about every platform except for YouTube and Pinterest. But they can find me on just about any platform. The Queer Life Coach.
The Queer Life Coach.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
that's the interview.
Woo! Yay.